Hi everybody, welcome to another revision webinar, and tonight we're going to be looking at an A2 macro question, an essay question, which is actually drawn from the edXcel board. But what I thought I'd want to do is take you through my suggested answer to it. Keep in mind, those of you doing AQA, OCR, and other boards as well, many of the ideas here, many of the hints and tips and tricks I'm going to give you in the next 15-20 minutes are actually relevant across the different exam boards. But I wanted to emphasize just a couple of things on the A2 macro, which I think could be extremely important for you when you come to take your final paper in economics in a couple of weeks' time. So hopefully this will be a useful session for you, and I'm always happy to keep the conversation going on Twitter if you want to get in touch with me in a few minutes. Now, this question, I've tried to take a question which has a significant relevance for example, OCR 585, an AQA question on the world economy, globalization, and particularly any exam question on the causes of and the consequences of globalization. So there are two parts to this, and I'll take you through each in turn. First is a 20 marker in our board edXcel. Assess the view. The main cause of globalization is the increased significance of transnational companies. 20 marks. Here's the idea, which I've used a lot in AS, and it's been quite successful in recent times. And this is the idea to think about the 4 skills that the exam is going to test you on, and crucially, how you can build and structure an answer really clearly to a good standard, to a high level, to get absolutely top marks in the paper. 4 skills are knowledge, application, analysis, and evaluation. Application, is nearly always making good use, for example, of data and arguments and pointers in the extracts. So this is an essay question we're going to be looking at, so it won't be necessarily great scope for application, but there's still possibilities for you to do that. The really key thing that I'm going to try and get across for you tonight is the balance between analysis and evaluation, and what I would look for from a really good answer in this question. So this is a question about what are the main causes of globalization, and assess is clearly a command word which asks you to evaluate. So what are the main causes? And it's a kind of steer in the question that transnational corporations, multinationals, are right at the heart of globalization as a process. Here we go. Now, as we go through these slides, there's quite a bit of text to read. Don't worry, I'm not going to run through them quickly. We'll take time to pause and ponder and think about how the answer is shaping up. Now, this is what's called a color-coded approach to writing an answer. So the idea is that in each main paragraph or separate paragraph, you build the skills of the exam. So, for example, I would always start my answer with a clear definition. For example, in this case, what globalization is. Notice there, I describe it as a process. So it's an ongoing idea, deeper integration and interdependence between countries. Now that's where a lot of people stop. That's their definition of globalization. My advice to students is to take your definition just that little bit further. So globalization is evidenced by an increase in trade to GDP ratios, the rising cross-border capital flows, and increasingly, as we've seen, migration between countries. And then I also define transnational corporation, the multinational, that's because it's in the question. So TNCs base their manufacturing, assembly, research, and retail in numerous countries. Now, the key here, I think, in this question is that the flow of the question from left to right is that transnational corporations are the fundamental driver of globalization. So if I was in an exam, I would take that flow and go with it to start with. So my first point is that TNCs have been at the vanguard of this process. Look at the bit in blue there, a bit of application. Many transnational corporations have become synonymous with globalization, such as Apple, Walmart, Google, Samsung, etc. Many of you will have good examples that you can use. But acknowledge there, Google's got offices in more than 60 countries, and 500 TNCs account for nearly 3/4 of world trade. So you're starting your answer with definitions, and you're starting to feed into the answer, just sprinkling the answer there with some good examples. Then I move into my analysis. TNCs are a key driver of globalization because, and notice that I'm going back to the question. because they've been relocating manufacturing to countries with lower unit labour costs to increase their profits and returns for shareholders. That is an analysis point, it's a causal point. And they go back to some knowledge. By the way, the text in red here is what they call bridging phrases. It just is a little bit of glue that keeps the answer very focused on the question. So my example is that Nissan and General Motors both have bases in Mexico. And that's helping Mexico develop a significant competitive advantage in car making within NAFTA. So I'm making a point, I'm exemplifying it, and I'm putting a little bit of analysis in there. I'm focusing on unit labor costs. Then I'm evaluating. Now, when I evaluate, my text is in green. However, I argue that there's been resistance to inward investment from TNCs. Perhaps they displace workers from domestic businesses. They can cause loss of employment. There's been a lot of controversy over working conditions and low wages, calling for controls on capital investment from TNCs. And I finished my section there with an example. The awful, the terrible factory collapse in Bangladesh. The Rana Plaza garment factory killed over 1,000 workers and brought into the open across the world the kind of employment practices of quite a few companies, including Primark and Gap. Can you see what I'm trying to do here? This is 2 paragraphs, by the way. It's not 1 paragraph. The second paragraph starts with the green. I'm defining my term. I'm using good examples. I'm putting a little bit of theory in. That gets me my analysis. And then I'm saying, well, actually, on the other hand, TNCs are not necessarily the main driver of globalization. And I'm evaluating. And you do this again. This is like it's like tiling a bathroom. Okay, one tile on top of each other, and you just build the tiles. By the way, I don't tile my bathroom very often, but I do this in exams. Now, an analysis diagram can be really handy at A2. One of the things which is quite interesting if you read exam scripts that come through from students, so that often they go back to kind of simple supply and demand theory when answering questions. And that's okay. It's a reasonable approach. But actually what I would want you to do, everybody in the exam, which is coming up pretty quickly, I'd want you to use the A2 economic theory that you've been taught to make a point. This diagram looks horrendously complicated, but actually all it is the idea that a company could make bigger profits from moving to a high labor cost country to a lower labor cost country. And a profit maximizing firm could produce, for example, at Q1 at a lower price P1, if they were in a lower cost country, and make a much bigger profit than if they charged a high price in a high cost country. That analysis diagram on its own would be worth a clear 4 marks in an essay question, because it's showing why TNCs are driving an investment to countries where unit labor costs are lower. Then again, the similar format, another view. So we're being asked to explain why TNCs are a major driver of globalization, and I took a slightly different tack in this section. Again, it's a 2-paragraph component. It's my analysis followed by my evaluation. Analysis always comes first. So here I'm arguing that actually what's really interesting at the moment is the rise of TNCs from emerging countries, from developing nations. So most students in the exam, the vast majority, would only talk about Western multinationals, Google and Walmart and Tutor to You, the big ones. Actually, it would be extremely good in an essay, in an exam, to think about multinationals from developing countries. Think about the message that sends to the examiner about your awareness on this topic. So in this question, in this part of the answer, I talk about China Mobile being one of the top 10 brands in the world. Alibaba has become a huge online retailer globally. The Tata Group rivals Samsung as one of the world's biggest conglomerates. Geely, Chinese car maker, buys the iconic Swedish firm Volvo. And again, then you get into the analysis because they wanted to buy the technology, they wanted to buy the intellectual property, they wanted to acquire the human capital to drive their development. So again, I'm thinking about the flow of the question here. TNCs are key drivers of globalization. However, would this have happened without other causes? That's evaluation. So globalization is being stimulated not just by TNCs, but by a fall in import tariffs, the rise of regional trade agreements, and the emergence, for example, of highly populous countries where per capita incomes are of a certain level that they create a consumer market that's good enough to invest in. So right at the bottom of this slide, I'm talking here about Samsung's investment in Vietnam, motivated not just by lower labor costs, but also by the fact that the Vietnamese consumer market is becoming quite a powerful driver and magnet for foreign investment. Again, there's a lot of reading on this slide, and I do urge you to maybe press the pause button on the YouTube clip here, and you can go through it in your own time. But I'm building an answer, around analysis first, then evaluation. And again, that will be a 2-paragraph answer. My final section would be to say that globalization is not just caused by TNCs, it's caused by other factors, and I'm sure some of these variables are things that your teachers will have emphasized to you. So there's barely an economics teacher on the planet who doesn't mention containerisation, the process by which the cost of shipping goods and services and getting products to market has come down over time, the so-called death of distance argument. So you can see there, this slide here is full of analysis. Containerisation is an economy of scale. It's brought, it's made markets more contestable. Technological change has cut the cost of communicating. There's lots of causal economics here, but you have to evaluate. And the crucial thing, you have to evaluate the point you've made. So, yes, these processes have helped transnational corporations, but equally, they've given big opportunities for smaller businesses to make an impact and actually to grow quite rapidly. Be it Uber in cities around the world challenging the dominance of established taxi firms, or just localized businesses actually starting to take over from globalization. What's the argument here? The argument is that this kind of approach is built on a simple idea: analyze first, support with examples, and then evaluate. And the phrase that a lot of students use is however, or on the other hand, or this argument depends on. But just be able and be confident in evaluating the point that you've made. Now, the second part of this question, if you're an EdXL student, it's a 30 marker. This is a kind of 25 marker for AQA, and it's the big 20 marker for OCR. This is a question which is very open-ended. It's one which a lot of AT students will have revised. To what extent do the costs of globalization outweigh the benefits? Can I make an incredibly important point here, which I think is just so vital to the exam? The question talks about the costs of globalization being greater than the benefits. You might well have revised an essay about the benefits of globalization outweighing the costs. So you can approach this question from any direction, but my strong advice is to go with the flow of the question. Go from left to right. Start with the costs and then build the critical evaluation and some of the benefits into your green text. Here's my first point. Globalization is not inevitable. The financial crisis of 2007 to 2009 made that clear. And I talk about a cost of globalization being the so-called income inequality paradox. That whilst inequality has gone down between countries, the gap between rich and poor within many countries has actually got bigger. And then I developed the point about inequality damaging growth and development and causing governments to be deprived of tax revenue. So my first point is that globalization has led to increased inequality. I then put in a counter argument. I put in an evaluative counter argument. Globalization has actually caused the biggest fall in extreme poverty, people living on less than $1.25 per day, PPP, that the world's ever seen. That much of the progress in recent years has been to lift people out of extreme poverty in China, in India, and now increasingly in sub-Saharan Africa. In countries such as China and Brazil, the Gini coefficient has come down. And as countries become richer, partly through globalization, they're starting to introduce welfare safety nets, cash transfer policies, and things like minimum wage. Do you see here, if you're looking at the screen with me tonight, do you see the structure of my answer here? I'm starting by developing analytically a cost of globalization, and then that lovely phrase in red in the middle there, however a counter argument is. That's a great phrase to use in the exam that's coming up. It almost naturally leads you into an evaluation point. And if you can support the argument, you'll get the extra credit. Again, could I use a theory diagram? Well, many of you will have revised or are revising the theory of trade, the theory of comparative advantage. We actually have a special revision webinar on that on our YouTube site. And this will be a diagram I would chuck in at some point showing the potential gains from globalization. Mexico and South Korea producing trucks and cars, and if they trade at a mutually beneficial rate of exchange, both countries effectively can shift their PPFs out. At some point in the answer, everybody, I'm looking to bring in an analysis diagram, either showing the cost of globalization, perhaps a pollution externalities diagram, or showing the benefits of globalization, in this case a trade diagram. And the key to the exam preparation is to practice these diagrams until they're absolutely right. You can draw them in your sleep. And of course, if you fall asleep in the exam, you might have to do that. Get these diagrams right, you can get great marks in quick time. Back to the question. Again, I'm going with the flow. Another cost of globalization is the red text, everybody, at the start of this paragraph. The red text is my bridging phrase. It takes me back to the question. And examiners love you to do that because they like to give marks. Some of them have nervous tics. They give lots of good marks. Okay. Another cost of globalization is the fact that imbalances between countries have got bigger. So I'm arguing that globalization has caused rising inequality. It's also caused increasing imbalances, particularly countries that are running huge trade surpluses, Singapore, Norway, compared with countries like South Africa, Brazil, and the African countries with big trade deficits. So my argument is that globalization has caused increased trade imbalances, but many poor countries are actually running deficits and becoming increasingly reliant on external deficits and on external funding. And as those imbalances get bigger, then we get the threat of protectionism and capital controls and currency wars. Again, this is a 2-paragraph answer. I put it all in 1 paragraph. You'd split it up, and the green text would be the start of a 2nd paragraph. Another cost of globalization to some critics has been the power and reach of brands. So the domination of global brands, the taking over local standardized products. So, for example, over half the world's hotels are now branded hotels, intercontinental, Holiday Inn, that kind of thing. The profits from these hotels rarely stay in the host nations, and those big branded scaled holiday resorts often damage the prospects of commercial viability of smaller businesses. So that's a kind of, what's the argument here? This is the argument that globalization leads to like cultural sterility and standardization. It drives out local producers and sacrificing local jobs and local incomes. A counter argument to this is my bridging phrase, is that investment brought into these countries by multinational hotel chains is a benefit. They employ people, full-time jobs, paying conditions probably better than before. They may well train their workers better. Governments receive extra revenue, which is useful. And increasingly, and this is where the local knowledge can come here, all of TNCs have made progress in ethical sourcing of local food and drink, and also in becoming kind of green and ethical in terms of the carbon footprint. Again, in this answer, what I'm trying to do is build my argument first. A cost of globalization is a loss of cultural diversity, but then build my counter argument. That's my evaluation. If I was in the exam with you, I'd be thinking these terms. When I'm analyzing, I'm writing in purple. When I'm putting a really good example, it's turning orange. As soon as I use that phrase, a counter argument is, or however, my text is turning to green, and I just evaluate and I challenge and I question the point I've just made. That's the way to do it in the exam. You just have to do it several times over. And then you get to the final bit, the last paragraph. I've given you actually two possible paragraphs here. AQA, I know that you have to write a slightly longer reasoned conclusion, arguments for and against, and then they're looking for quite a lengthy section at the end. That's not true with Edexcel. The Edexcel board and OCR are really looking for a final reasoned comment. You come to a view, and if there's one word that you should take into the exam all the time and use, it's the word why. Why is something happening? Why does it matter? Why can economists be concerned about these particular issues? So, do the costs of globalization outweigh the benefits? Well, in my final paragraph, I try to come to a reason why I believe the argument I'm going to put forward. So I've given you two paragraphs here. For Edexcel, you really only need one paragraph. Let's go through the top one. On balance. By the way, I love that phrase. I love that idea of on balance. It suggests that you're kind of weighing up the arguments when you're actually in the exam room. How cool is that? On balance, I would argue that the long-term benefits are greater than the disadvantages. Again, putting in that little phrase, long-term, suggests you're thinking beyond the immediate cycle or the immediate economic period. Even though the World Trade Organization has yet to get close to completing new multilateral trade deals, the high volume of trade agreements, TPP, deepening relationships with the SCR, show how important trade and investment remains. In other words, if globalization didn't bring benefits, then countries wouldn't be engaging in all of these trade agreements. That's my argument. Second paragraph, slightly different. There's a trend towards regionalization rather than globalization. Got a feeling some of you will be writing about that in the next week or two. Globalization faces threats from structural inequality and imbalances, but the protectionist fears have not necessarily materialized post-2007. Globalization will continue, accelerated by technological spillovers and the movement of talented people across borders, because the long-term benefits, both tangible things we can measure and intangible things that are harder to calibrate, are enormous. Now this final paragraph is a little wordy, I think. I could improve it, and in an exam you'd probably be running out of time. But in my view, a final reasoned comment is important, and I think I stated in both of those paragraphs. But what's incredibly significant is that I do try and justify the argument. Okay, so in the final bit of your evaluation, this could be the last bit of economics you write in an A2 course. Make your argument, state it, but most important, everybody, to help the evaluation, reason why you argued it. My argument in the top paragraph here is that if globalization did not bring more benefits than costs, countries would not be trying to negotiate trade and investment deals. And that's why I think the benefits ultimately outweigh the costs. Equally, globalization is not inevitable. And we shouldn't necessarily assume that it is. So there you have a color-coded answer to the question. I hope you found this useful, and that you will be able to get some good evaluation marks along with the analysis marks as you head into the exam. So for now, I'll sign off and look forward to seeing you again sometime soon.